We're going to move into our final question of the night now, and this one has come in from Sandra, who asks, why was it necessary for sins to be paid for or taken away? Why was it necessary for God to have someone pay for the sins of humankind? Why couldn't God just wipe them away himself? I think this is a question that a lot of people have. It's a question that I had as a teenager. I used to really wrestle with this. I used to think, why does God judge people? Why can't he just forgive everybody? After all, isn't that what we've all been taught to do at church and in Sunday school every time that we go? So why then can't God practice what he preaches? But for me, my thinking really dramatically changed on this. And the trigger for that was when one of my dearly beloved friends went through the horrendous trauma of being raped. And seeing her deal with the consequences of that, seeing her begin to hate herself and punish her own body by not eating and exercise all the time because she just didn't feel good about herself, and move from one broken relationship to another because she just couldn't cope with the intimacy, and constantly blame herself for something that actually was not her fault. There are actually no words to describe how angry I was that happened to her, or how badly I wanted the person who did this to her and who got away with it to be held accountable and to experience judgment, for justice to be served. I think that's when it hit me that actually, if I cannot stand to see the people that I love wronged and mistreated, then how much more must a God who loves every single one of us more than we could possibly imagine be for the ways that we violate and abuse and harm and damage one another. I think sometimes we can think of love and judgment as opposites, as if they're in conflict with one another, but actually the two go hand in hand. And the truth is that many of you who are watching this evening have been really hurt and wronged. And that truly matters, that deeply matters to God. That matters so much, he's not just going to sweep it under the carpet and say, no big deal, but he's going to say, no, I'm going to ensure that justice is served because you are more valuable to me than that. And I think that instinct that love and justice go together is actually something we know in our own culture. If you look at the biggest social movements of our time today, whether it's about racial equality, or whether it's about the Me Too movement, or whether it's about environmental justice, every one of the things that we're most concerned about in the West today all have to do with an issue of justice that we're fighting for, because we recognize that actually without justice between ourselves, society doesn't work, relationships don't work, love just cannot exist without justice in these conditions. So what's surprising to me is that we turn it around on God, and we have this sort of double standard where we don't expect God to operate by the same standards that we ourselves operate by in relationships. But surely it should be the opposite. If God exists, then shouldn't he have a higher standard and a deeper concern for justice than anybody else? Because he's the only one who can tell right from wrong, the only one who isn't just doing what's right in their own eyes, but who's seeing the whole thing clearly, and the only one who can actually guarantee and ensure that justice will be served when our fallible human systems of justice so often fail people in the worst possible ways. That is what we should expect. And I think the other irony here is that we're so caught up in justice in our culture that actually we're becoming angrier and angrier with each other. And so actually the thing that there isn't room for anymore today in our culture isn't justice, that we're all about, but it's forgiveness. We actually don't have any room for forgiveness in our culture. And we feel like we can't even have both, which is worrying for us, because if you take that to the divine perspective, in the words of one of my favorite amateur sleuths, Miss Marple, in Agatha Christie's amazing Murder at the Vicarage novel, Miss Marple says this. She says, I would be concerned if when my time came, the only plea I would have to offer is that of justice, because then only justice might be meted out to me. See, the thing is, we want to have justice in our lives and for our loved ones, but we do not want to face justice. Because I think deep down, as Abdu's been speaking to, we see it even in the fact we're raiding our supermarkets, that we're selfish. And that if we face justice, then we're in huge trouble. And so we feel like we're in this kind of ultimatum where either we're going to get justice at the expense of forgiveness, or we're going to get forgiveness at the expense of justice, but we don't get both. That's how it seems to function in our culture today. And yet, what is so amazing about the Christian faith is that God refuses to make that choice. But not only does he refuse, he actually is loving enough and powerful enough that he does not have to. And that is what we see at the cross. Actually, ironically, Sandra, you've answered the question yourself, because the truth is God does just wipe away our sins. He does do that himself. But the way he does that is not by trampling on justice, but by ensuring that justice is served when he himself and Jesus Christ voluntarily comes and serves the sentence that we deserved. He gives the guilty verdict, but then he pays it so that we don't have to, so that we can actually go free and receive what Jesus deserved, which was an innocent sentence and release and pardon and the fullness of life. That's why in Romans, the Bible speaks of it in this way, that God is both just and he's the justifier. God does both of those things. And what I find so amazing here is that God doesn't only wipe away our sins so that we can have the fullness of life, but also at the very end, it also says in the last book of the Bible, in Revelation, that actually one day there will be no more mourning or crying or sickness or pain. That's the kind of life that Jesus is eternally promising for us. But actually God himself, he won't just wipe away sin, but he's going to wipe away every single tear. I think, how much is that a hope that we need to hold on to in this moment that we're living in today, where we see the sin in the ways that we are just treating one another in this crisis. We see people doing beautiful acts of sacrifice amongst health professionals as well. And to me, I look at that and that speaks to me of the love of God and the way Jesus loved. But we also see tremendous selfishness, which we need God to put right in our relationships. We need justice. We need sin to be dealt with. But also, how much do we need our tears to be wiped away? How much do we need to know there is a God who is concerned for our suffering and our pain, a God who's concerned so much that he would come and die that death and suffer for us so that he could be with us in it, so that we are not alone in that. And I hope that that is a message that speaks hope to you tonight, wherever you are and whatever you might be dealing with.